The Rape of Lucrece by William Shakespeare. Sources, summary, and analysis. Hello and welcome to the discourse. We are discussing the verses of William Shakespeare. While we celebrate Shakespeare as a brilliant dramatist of all times, Shakespeare as a poet equaled his fame and perhaps outstripped his fame as a dramatist. He dedicated his first long narrative poem to his patron Henry Wriothesley. In his dedication to him in Venus and Adonis, Shakespeare promised that while that poem was light-hearted, he will produce a graver labor. Obviously, his second long narrative poem had to be more grave, deep, and thought-provoking. The Rape of Lucrece was published in 1594. He dedicated this second poem to Henry Wriothesley again. Apart from his dedication to him, he also added a descriptive prose titled The Argument, which explained the historical background of the poem. Shakespeare wrote Venus and Adonis in sestet in iambic pentameter. He again used iambic pentameter for Rape of Lucrece, but it was written in rhyme royal. The poetic style of rhyme royal was also used by Geoffrey Chaucer before him, and after him, John Milton also used rhyme royal. So Venus and Adonis was written in sestet with 6 lines in stanzas, while the Rape of Lucrece was written in rhyme royal with 7 lines in a stanza. There are 265 stanzas in this poem and the total number of lines is 1855. Sources. The Rape of Lucrece is based on real historical events of the ancient Roman Empire, which were previously depicted by Ovid and Geoffrey Chaucer. Perhaps Shakespeare read both of the works. Story of Lucrece is mentioned in Ovid's Fasti and Livy's History of Rome. Historical background. In the argument, Shakespeare explained the premises of this poem. He talked about the event of Roman history which became the immediate cause for the end of the monarchy in Rome and establishment of the Roman Republic. The poem talks about the son of Roman king Lucius Taraquin, who was very arrogant and killed his own father and brother-in-law to take control of the Roman crown. Because of his arrogance and tyranny, he was known as Taraquinus Superbus or the Taraquin the Arrogant. His son was Sextus Taraquin, who raped a noble lady Lucretia, who was the wife of Collatinus, one of the king's aristocratic retainer. Lucretia was a noble, chaste lady, and after being raped, she couldn't fathom the disharmony between her chaste mind and loyal to her husband, and abused, dishonored, and unchaste body ruined by the rapist prince. So she commits suicide, but before doing so, she tells her husband and her father about the abuse she had to suffer and asks them to take revenge. Her body was paraded throughout the Rome by the king's nephew, and as a result, a sudden revolt arose in which Taraquin and his son were murdered and Rome was declared a republic after it. Shakespeare depicted this historical incident in his poetic manner. Summary. The poem begins with a conversation between Collatin and Taraquin, who are in Ardea where they are fighting against the Volscians, a tribe. Collatin is missing his beloved wife and starts praising her for her indescribable beauty and loyalty towards him. In his mood, he praises Lucrece's beauty in such details that Taraquin begins feeling desire to see her. He feels that he is attracted towards her even while he has never seen her, but just have heard about her from her husband. The next morning, Taraquin decides to see Lucrece by his own eyes and sneaks out of the army camp to go to Collatium where Lucrece lives. He is the prince and a friend of her husband. So when Taraquin reaches at Lucrece's home, she greets him well and offers him food and rest. She asks about her husband's well-being, and Taraquin tells her a lot of stories of his valor and success in the war. At the end of their conversation, Taraquin reaches to the conclusion that Lucrece is the most beautiful woman he ever saw. Shakespeare described the beauty of Lucrece in great erotic details. After taking dinner, Lucrece arranges a bed for Taraquin in a well-furnished room with all facilities as a prince deserves. However, Taraquin couldn't sleep. His mind is wandering and he is facing a dilemma. He lusts for Lucrece and thinks of going and getting her. However, he realizes that this act will bring a great dishonor to him. He leaves the bed and starts marching in the room to remove the unholy thoughts from his mind. But he couldn't resist his unbridled lust for Lucrece. As a military man, he tries to control his desires and do the right thing, but he again fails. He feels that his desire to have Lucrece is increasing with each passing minute. Finally, he gives up the hand of reason and succumbs to his immoral feelings and decides to enter in Lucrece's chamber where she is sleeping. All the other members and servants of the house are also sleeping. As he moves towards Lucrece's chamber, he faces many troubles to suggest him as bad omens to omit the sin he has decided to do. The locks of the doors of various rooms he has to cross before reaching Lucrece's chamber are not easy to open. His light torch also diminishes as the wind starts blowing fast. In the lack of proper light, he severs his hand with a nail on the door. While all these are bad omens, as if the gods wants him to stop him from doing the immoral act he has decided to do. He feels these are only the trials of his goal, after which he will get the most pleasurable reward. He declares love and fortune as his gods and prays them to get success and enters in the chamber of Lucrece. In her bed, Lucrece is sleeping soundly. Taraquin observes her body and praises her body. Then he decides to touch her and feel her. As he starts groping her breasts, she wakes up and frightened, she shouts. Taraquin tries to calm her down, but she is furious. Then Taraquin decides to threaten her. He tells Lucrece that he is deeply in love with her and he cannot do anything about it. He tells her that she should submit to his desires, otherwise he will dishonor her and prove her disloyal to her husband. He says that if she doesn't submit to him, he will kill her, and then he plans to kill one of her servant. He says that he will lay the body of her servant on her bed with her body and tell everyone that he saw Lucrece in intimate act with the servant. And as he couldn't control his anger on the woman for her infidelity, he killed both of them. He tells her that if she fulfills his desire, he will keep all secrets and nobody will ever come to know about it. Lucrece considers her situation and begins to weep. He begs pity from Taraquin and tells him not to do such sin. She reminds him of her hospitality to him and his friendship with her husband. She reminds him he is a soldier and a prince. He needs to be just. But Taraquin rejects all her requests. Her tears and pleading only increases his lust as a sadist, and he rapes her brutally, as he smoothens her cries with the linen bedding. After the sinful act, Taraquin is filled with shame and remorse. He leaves Lucrece's chamber and her home. Lucrece is disturbed, distraught, and frightened that as the sun will come over the sky, her sin will be visible to the world. She thinks of her husband, to whom she was completely loyal, but now her body is ruined, dishonored. She decides to take her life, but she couldn't leave her criminal to go free. She chooses a knife to kill herself, but decides to make it sure that her abuser will be punished before killing herself. So she decides to write a letter to her husband and demands him to come back home immediately. Coletin is a caring husband. He returns to home as soon as he gets the letter of Lucrece. Along with him comes his friend Junius Brutus, the descendant of the same Mark Brutus who appears in the drama Julius Caesar. As he reaches home, he sees his beautiful wife in complete black, dark mourning cloth. Her hair are distraught and she appears weak and ill. He asks her what happened to her. Lucrece doesn't respond but asks him to promise her that he will take revenge. Collatin, unaware of the abuse, promises her, and then she weeps and tells everything she had to suffer. Collatin then demands the name of the rapist. Lucrece reminds him of his promise and then tells him his name is Taraquin, your friend. Then she picks the knife she chose to kill her and stabs herself. Collatin couldn't believe his friend will do such a sinful act. He remembers his promise but couldn't fathom how he can take revenge. He is sad. He decides to commit suicide too, but his friend Junius Brutus stops him and suggests a way to take revenge. They take the body of Lucrece out on her last bed and they roam with her abused body in all the streets of Rome. Seeing the injustice, the people revolt. The indignant citizens banish the whole Taraquin family and the poem ends. Shakespeare made use of Ovid's Fasti and Roman resources of his history to write this poem. He also read Chaucer's work on the story. However, he added another rhyme to the story, which was complaint. First, Taraquin complains as he suffers the dilemma between his unbridled lustful desire and his sense as soldier, that his sinful act will bring dishonor to his family, will disrespect his friendship with Collatin, and will ruin the life of Lucrece. He struggles against himself and he loses. Then comes the complaint of Lucrece, in which she struggles against herself for the shame that Taraquin has caused to her. Ultimately, she decides to end herself. In Roman terms, suicide in specific conditions can be a heroic death, which is of Lucrece. But in Christian terms, suicide is a sin in itself. Lucrece, however, feels that despite her chaste mind, her body is rendered unchaste. And as contradiction between her mind and body should not exist, she decides to leave the body and remain with her chaste mind. So this was all about the rape of Lucrece. Next, we will discuss the sonnets of Shakespeare. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.